One day, Josh was at a carnival when he stumbled upon a strange fortune-teller machine. It wasn't plugged in, but it was working just fine. Curious, he dropped a coin into it and made a wish.
I wish I were big.
Almost immediately, a card popped out, saying your wish is granted. But Josh looked at himself and didn't notice any changes. So he just brushed it off as some kiddie game and went home like nothing happened. However, that night, the wind howled outside, and Josh, fast asleep, had no idea his body was already going through some strange changes. The next morning, when he woke up, he was shocked. He had actually grown into an adult. He didn't dare tell his family and quickly put on his dad's clothes, rushing out the door to find the fortune-teller machine and reverse the wish. But when he got to where the machine had been, all he found was a mess of trash. The machine was gone. Desperate, Josh went home to confess to his mom, but she didn't believe him at all. He tried to prove his identity by listing his birthday and favorite things, but it only made things worse. His mom thought he was a kidnapper and kicked him out. With no other option, Josh went to school to find his best friend Billy. But Billy, just like his mom, didn't recognize him. Josh grabbed him, desperate for Billy to see who he really was. But Billy freaked out and tried to break free. Then, suddenly, Josh sang a song only the two of them knew.
Shimmy, shimmy, cocoa pop, shimmy, shimmy, rock, shimmy, shimmy, cocoa pop, shimmy, shimmy, rock.
For Billy, this was even more convincing than a DNA test report. He had no choice but to believe that the man standing in front of him was indeed his best friend, Josh. After hearing that Josh had gone missing, the neighbors had already surrounded his house, creating a thick crowd. So, Billy had no choice but to sneak out his father's clothes for Josh to wear. Billy suggested that maybe the carnival was still nearby and that they should head into town to check. So the two of them sat on a bench waiting for the bus. Suddenly, Billy handed him a large sum of money. Josh had no choice but to accept the emergency money Billy gave him. However, after searching the city all day, they couldn't find any trace of the carnival. With no other option, they had to find a small remote motel where Josh could spend the night. Since Billy had a curfew at home, he had to leave first. He told Josh he'd be there the next morning to help him search for the fortune-teller machine. Before leaving, he reminded Josh to lock the door, as it might not be safe around here. Alone in the room, Josh felt downcast. It was his first time staying somewhere other than home. Every little noise outside made him jumpy. Suddenly, he heard shouting from the neighboring room. Josh was so scared that he didn't dare breathe. He curled up on the bed, softly calling for his mom. He spent the night trembling, barely sleeping. The next morning, he left with Billy. They first went to an arcade, but the owner told them there was no fortune-teller machine there. Then, they visited the government office, hoping to find some information about the carnival where the machine had appeared. But the response they got left them disappointed. To get the information, they'd have to wait 6 weeks. Though 6 weeks didn't sound like much, for Josh, it felt like an eternity. Billy encouraged him not to give up easily. Although the chances seemed slim, there was still hope. While they waited, Josh could look for a job and experience what being an adult was really like. So they spent the day eating things their families wouldn't usually allow, flipping through newspapers to find a suitable job for Josh. His eyes immediately landed on a position at a toy company. Josh thought that working at a toy company meant he could play with toys all day. That sounded too good to pass up. Without hesitating, Josh ran to the company to apply. On his resume, he wrote that he had 4 years of computer experience. In reality, he'd only played computer games for 4 years. He also listed that he graduated from the famous Washington University. The interviewer immediately hired Josh on the spot and assigned him to the computer department. Fortunately, the job wasn't too difficult. He just had to enter data into the computer. Kids tend to learn quickly, so this simple task was a breeze for Josh. Before long, he had completed most of the day's work. However, one of his colleagues saw how fast Josh was working and quickly stopped him, urging him to slow down. He told him the job at the company was easy and laid back. As long as you didn't rush, you could get by with little effort and still earn a decent salary. But if the bosses found out that employees were finishing their work too quickly, it could lead to a pay cut or worse, layoffs. It was this kind of passive work attitude from the employees that had caused the company's performance to decline. And the boss was stressed out because of it. Meanwhile, Josh, who had been assigned to make copies, happened to bump into the boss. Surprisingly, instead of getting angry, the boss praised Josh's work ethic, saying the company needed more energy like his. Back at his desk, Josh noticed that all his coworkers were slacking off. So he took the opportunity to call his mom too. Pretending to be a kidnapper, he reassured her that Josh was safe and told her not to worry. Hearing the harsh words from his mother, Josh couldn't help but smile contentedly. He couldn't wait to be reunited with her after 6 weeks. As the days passed, Josh started to adapt to this new life. He could watch TV as long as he wanted, and no one told him to sit any closer or move any further away. When he ate cookies, he devoured only the filling and tossed the leftover cookies aside. And so, the first week passed, and Josh received his first paycheck. After work, he and Billy rushed to the bank to withdraw a sum of money they had never seen in their life. They bought a bunch of food and toys and celebrated in the room. On the weekend, with the goal of finding the fortune teller machine, Josh walked into a toy store run by the company. As soon as he stepped inside, he was dazzled by the array of toys. He immediately blended in with the children, playing with all kinds of toys without a care for the strange looks from others. At that moment, the boss, who was doing a routine inspection, happened to notice him. Seeing how much Josh loved the toys, the boss casually asked him what he thought about them. Josh eagerly started talking about the pros and cons of the toys, even offering suggestions for improvements to various types. Impressed by his opinions and enthusiasm, the boss looked at him in a new light. Suddenly, they came across a walking piano. Having studied music, Josh's playful side took over. He stepped forward and began playing with abandon, turning the performance into a dance. The boss, moved by Josh's passion, couldn't help but join in, following his rhythm. When the music ended, the crowd gathered around applauded warmly. After this experience, Josh's career took off. Just 7 days into his job, he was promoted by the boss to vice president of product development. All he needed to do was test out the company's latest toys and provide ideas for improvements. The boss even provided him with a spacious office and assigned him a personal assistant. However, Josh's rapid rise through the ranks caused a stir within the company. The executives were all on edge, fearing that the boss might be using Josh to send a signal, perhaps to initiate top-down reforms across the entire company. The president of product development worked day and night, quickly producing a new product. At a massive marketing campaign pitch meeting, the president of product development confidently presented the new product, using various technical data to explain its superiority. Then, he asked Josh to share his thoughts. However, Josh didn't understand any of the so-called data. He only knew that the product the president developed wasn't fun. Josh felt that rather than turning the building into a transforming toy, it would be better to turn insects and dinosaurs into transforming toys. After all, animals are far more interesting to kids than lifeless buildings. Josh's idea was met with approval from everyone present, and even the boss praised him enthusiastically. Because of his outstanding performance this time, Josh got a raise and decided to rent a huge apartment. He used his salary to buy many toys and transformed his home into a giant playground. Despite having so much fun every day, he never forgot to write letters to his mother, reassuring her not to worry about his safety and telling her he'd be home in a month. One night at a company party, some people were trying to flatter their bosses for a raise, while others were discussing business. No one was paying attention to the party itself. Then, the elevator dinged, and Josh walked out in a white tuxedo. He looked completely out of place among the crowd, and many people mocked his unconventional style. But the boss immediately approached him and praised his outfit. Josh's eccentricity also caught the eye of another executive, Susan. At the party, he didn't socialize like everyone else. He simply stood there, enjoying the forgotten meal at the party. Susan approached him, praised his toy ideas, and invited him to join her outside. The two of them got into the company car, and Josh, as curious as ever, explored everything surrounding him. He then asked Susan to stand up and stick her head out of the window to enjoy the view. This experience made Susan like him even more. That evening, she suggested staying over at Josh's place. She was invited to stay the night, but when she walked into the guy's apartment, she was totally shocked. If anything, it looked more like a playground than an apartment. Before she could even process what was happening, the guy eagerly pulled her over to the trampoline. Susan felt awkward at first, wanting to jump off after just one bounce. But he didn't let her. He dragged her along, bouncing away like a kid. Before long, Susan started to enjoy herself. For a moment, it felt like she was back in her childhood. Then, the two of them ended up playing with every toy in the apartment. It was a dating experience Susan had never had before, and it made her start to feel something different for the guy in front of her. During a squash match, he took advantage of Josh's lack of knowledge about the rules and even tackled him over a disputed point. Afterward, Josh couldn't understand why the president of product development disliked him so much. Susan explained, "Work is like a battlefield. Everyone is your enemy except yourself." Aside from his mother, Susan was the first woman to treat Josh so kindly. A different kind of feeling began to stir in his heart. A few days later, Billy came to celebrate Josh's birthday with him. However, after dinner, Josh didn't choose to party all night with Billy. Instead, he went on a date with Susan, leaving Billy by himself. The two of them had a great time at the carnival, and during that date, Josh and Susan officially became a couple. From then on, Josh threw himself into his work with even more energy. He stopped drinking milk in the mornings and started having black coffee instead. His position at the company kept rising, but so did the late hours. He missed many of Billy's calls, and it felt like Josh had lived through decades in just 1 month. Slowly, he started to lose his childhood innocence. One day, Billy finally tracked down the location of the fortune teller machine. Eager to find Josh, he rushed to the company. Josh was furious that Billy interrupted his work, but Billy was even angrier about the changes he saw in Josh. He reminded him that he was still just a 13-year-old kid. Did Josh really want to live in this adult body forever? With that, Billy stormed off. What Josh didn't know was that during his time away, Billy had been the one who took care of caring for his mother. It was then that Josh finally realized how much he had truly changed. The next day, he walked down the streets of his hometown, feeling as if more than 10 years had passed. 2 kids were playing in a pile of leaves by the side of the road. If things had gone differently, it should have been Billy and Josh playing here. He watched the children laughing on the baseball field, classmates gathering to take graduation photos. These were the moments of childhood Josh had missed. Moments he should have experienced, not spent working overtime at a company and worrying about one meeting after another. So, he went to see Susan and confessed everything. Josh quickly explained that he wasn't an adult, but rather a 13-year-old kid who had just celebrated his birthday. Susan, however, thought Josh was just trying to break up with her and using such an absurd excuse. She didn't want to hear any more of his explanation, and they parted ways on bad terms. The next day, Billy came to see Josh again. He gave his best friend one last chance. Billy had found the fortune teller machine and gave Josh its location. The choice was now up to Josh. He could either continue as a high-powered company executive or go back to being a kid. The decision was his to make. Josh thought long and hard before finally deciding to return to his original life. Meanwhile, Susan discovered a card from the fortune teller machine in Josh's wallet and realized that maybe, just maybe, Josh had been telling the truth. After hearing from Billy that Josh had decided to become a kid again, she quickly got the address and rushed to find him. On the other side, Josh discovered that the fortune teller machine was in the same park where he and Susan had gone on their date. At the time, he had been so caught up in his adult life that he hadn't noticed the machine. This time, he didn't hesitate to make his wish, to become a kid again. Just as he did, Susan arrived. But by then, the machine had already dispensed the card. The wish was granted. Susan instantly felt a wave of disappointment. She couldn't bear to let Josh go, nor could she bear to part with the happy moments they had shared. Josh suggested that she could also wish to go back to being 13, but Susan knew she had no reason to return to the past. She had already experienced the life of a 13-year-old, and even if she could go back, it would feel like nothing more than a pointless repetition. Despite the deep sense of reluctance that filled both of their hearts, the unchangeable fate made it clear that their relationship couldn't have a future. They had to let go. Susan drove Josh back to the small town, and as they reached the end of their journey, her heart was filled with countless unspoken words. But in the end, they all turned into one final, reluctant goodbye. The two of them made a promise, always to keep each other in their hearts. As Susan watched Josh walk away, 1,000 thoughts flooded her mind. Slowly, Josh returned to being the 13-year-old boy he once was, and they exchanged a smile. In the years to come, both of them would carry this memory with them, searching for their own happiness in the future, at different ages. And with that, the movie came to an end. Big, starring Tom Hanks, explores the theme of growing up in a humorous and heartwarming way. Whether it's growing up too quickly or wishing to return to the past, neither is the best choice in life. What we can do is fully experience the present. Feel free to leave your thoughts on the movie in the comments section. See you in the next movie.